Hello Year 10. So, we are going to have a look today at the reading that you did yesterday, the first piece of reading from A Christmas Carol. So I've got a few things that I need you to do at the start of this lesson. So the first thing I need you to do is write down your title and date. So analysing Stave 1 Part 1, and our date, it might be Tuesday the 5th of May. Have a look at the date and see what date it is, write it down in your book. Now it's really important you underline both with a ruler because even though you're not at school, it's really important that you present your book well. You're going to be going back to these notes when you revise in Year 11. So if you underline your title and date, then it helps you to pick out where you've started a new lesson, and it makes it easier to scan through your book to find revision notes. Your starter is a vocabulary starter, and I've got two words here which are both closely linked. So we've got misanthropic, which means hating humankind, so that's an adjective, and misanthropy, which is the noun, which is the hatred of humankind. What I would like you to do is, reflecting on what you read last lesson, I want you to write a sentence using one of those words. So either misanthropic, which is hating humankind, or misanthropy, the hatred of humankind. Please pause the video now and write down a sentence in your book. Okay, Year 10. So the next slide asks you to do your context corner. Now it's up to you how you do it. You could do it under today's title and date, and what I suggest is you take a double page in your exercise book, you write in the centre of that page A Christmas Carol context, and every time you do an analysis lesson and you learn a new piece of context, I suggest you add it to your mind map. So you can see that here I've written A Christmas Carol context, and I've taken the information from that slide and I've summarised it in this corner. So the title of this point is The New Poor Laws 1834. So I've summarised this. In 1815 there was the first Poor Law, and that meant that the poor were the responsibility of local councils. However, many felt the poor were to blame, so they felt they were to blame for their poverty. In 1834, with the new Poor Law, this meant that the unemployed instead went to the workhouse instead of relying on the charity of the local councils. And at the fourth bullet point, a little detail about workhouses. They had terrible conditions, families were separated, they were cruel, they were shameful, very little food, back-breaking work. So, can you please make sure that you take that slide from the PowerPoint and you turn that into a context corner for your mind map, or get it copied down under today's title and date. So you've had a little think about your context. And now the next thing that the PowerPoint tells you to do is to highlight the keywords in the question that you're being asked in order to analyse the extract. So before you start highlighting quotes in the extract, you need to highlight the keywords in this question. So the question is, how is Scrooge presented in this extract? So the first thing you always do is highlight the word how. It will come up in most questions. Now it's really important, because how is asking you to pick out which techniques have been used. So how always means using which techniques. After you've got your how, you need to ask yourself, right, what is the focus that I am meant to be drawing out from this extract? So it's a really straightforward one today, and it's how is Scrooge presented in this extract. So how and Scrooge are our two keywords for today. If you've got a copy of the PDF or a copy of the novel, you can draw a box around the relevant extract and you can annotate straight onto your box. However, if you don't have a copy, then leave some space in your book to write down your quotes that you're going to use in your response. It's a really good idea for everyone to get the question written down and the keywords highlighted before you start writing today. Okay, so the extract we're going to use today is at the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2 of the PDF. You can see I've just drawn a green box around it. I've drawn a little arrow to show it continues on to the next page, and any quotes that I'm using for My analysis today that I'm using to answer the question, how is Scrooge presented in the extract, I'm going to pick out in green pen so I know that those are the quotes for today rather than quotes I've previously picked out. So let's read through and then we can pick our 3 to 6 quotes which sum up Scrooge. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out a generous fire, secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shrivelled his cheek, stiffened his gait, and made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head and on his eyebrows and his wiry chin. He carried his own low temperature always about him. He iced his office in the dog days, and he didn't thaw it 1 degree at Christmas. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. No wind that blew was bitterer than he, no falling snow was more intent upon its purpose, no pelting rain less open to entreaty. Okay, so if you're wanting to get a high grade in your analysis for literature, then I always suggest you look for a semantic field. So that's the first thing that I would do. So I'm going to pick out grindstone, flint, steel, froze, stiffened, and I think that's it. So I'm going to take my pen wherever I've put it, and I'm going to mark out the semantic field of, and it's a hard one. That's quite funny. It's literally a hard one. No, it's a really difficult one to summarise, because grindstone, flint, steel, froze and stiffened also get just this idea of hardness, but it doesn't feel like the right word. So if you can think of a better word, of solids, of solidity, but that's what connects those words for me. Okay, and then I want to pick out maybe 2 fuller quotes. Okay, so you've picked out a semantic field. I want you to pause the video now and see if you can pick out 2 fuller quotes on your own that would link to this semantic field of hardness, giving the same impression. It doesn't have to be one of those words that we've already picked out. So pause now and pick out 2 more quotes at least. Okay, Year 10, so I've gone away while you were annotating. I've picked out 2 other quotes that I want to use. So I've gone for this sensory imagery here. So no warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. So it's sensory imagery. But it's also not literal, is it? It's about how warmth is meant to represent something bigger about human nature, and chilled, him being chilled is, so you could say it's symbolism. So temperatures are used to symbolize something bigger. And then I've also picked out this quote here, solitary as an oyster. And what I might do is, when I'm looking at that semantic field of hardness, of solidity, I might zoom in on, hard and sharp as flint or tight-fisted hand at the grindstone. But I'm definitely going to use solitary as an oyster as my 3rd quote. Okay, so once you've got those picked out, if you do not have your copy of the novel yet, then all I want you to do is to get them written down here. So we've got the semantic field of hardness, so flint, grindstone, stiffened, steel. I think there was also froze, but that's fine. And then we've got simile, So always write down what the technique is, okay, so that when you come back to your planning, you know that you've got to talk about techniques. Solitary as an oyster. And then our final one was the sensory imagery. Okay, so that was no warmth could warm. No wintry weather chill him. Okay. Right, so once you've got all your quotes planned out, so you can do more than that, I'm not stopping you, you might want to zoom in on this quote or this quote, maybe look at them in more detail, but once you've got them planned out, you then need to move on to your umbrella point. So what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and think about, right, what is the point I'm going to make about Scrooge, how Scrooge is presented, that connects together all of these quotes. Off you. I just want to talk you through how to write a good point sentence. So you might write something like, in the extract, Dickens presents Scrooge as misanthropic, and that's great if you want a grade 5, a grade 6, but if you want to go higher, if you want to push up to the grade 7s and 8s, then you need to think about linking your point to Dickens's purpose. So why is Dickens presenting Scrooge as misanthropic? So in the extract, Dickens presents presents Scrooge as misanthropic in order to. Now, what is the bigger picture? What is he trying to show us about society? So, what does he think society needs? The need for greater empathy in society. Right. Excellent. So, moving on. We need our context. So, after your point sentence, I suggest you always go into your context, which is about, what is it about the time that this was written? Okay, so what is it at the time that it was written that makes Dickens want to focus on that need for greater empathy in society? Well, we're going to go to the New Poor Laws, aren't we? 1834. The focus on workhouses, so the poor then got sent to workhouses, which were seen to be prisons for the poor, and therefore the government, local councils are treating the poor like criminals with, link back to our points, with no empathy. Really hard back-breaking work in these workhouses. So, we've got our point planned out, we've got our context. Now, it's really important that context goes after the point sentence, especially if in the point you mention Dickens and his purpose. This is because the context flows better and it helps you build up an argument about Dickens's purpose if you can link to what was happening at the time than if you tag it on at the end. It won't flow as well and it won't build up your argument. Once you've done your point sentence in your context, this is how you do the rest of your paragraph. So you go point, you go overall impression of the extract, and Dickens's purpose. So that's what you've got to include in your point sentence. And then you've got the context. So what influenced Dickens? You can even start your context sentence with Dickens was influenced by. And then you go into quote 1, or in the case of the semantic field, the cluster of quotes. So you quote, and then you go, what is the technique? So explain the effect of the technique, zoom, and then what's the overall effect on the reader? Okay, and then again, into quote 2, technique, zoom, effect, and then quote 3, technique, zoom, effect. And right at the end, bring it all back together and then summarise what Dickens manages to achieve in terms of the message he gives the reader. So therefore, Dickens, what's he doing? What's he telling the reader? Therefore, Dickens tells the reader, or Dickens highlights, or Dickens critiques. Okay, so use an analytical verb there. Right, so that is your analysis for Stave 1 Part 1. You need to now go away and write this up into a paragraph. Take a photo of it. Once you've done, send it to your teacher. You do not need to send us your annotations if you have annotated directly onto your book or your PDF. If you've planned out in your book, then by all means send us a photo of that. We also want to see a photo of your starter that shows you using your keyword in a sentence. Okay, well done Year 10. Off you go.